Well, welcome everyone. Happy snowy evening. Really appreciate you making it out tonight, given the circumstances of our first day of winter, it seems. My name is Jay Smith. I am the manager of Animal Services with the City of Mississauga. I'd really like to welcome you this evening to this evening's Coyote information session. It's a warm welcome to those who have joined us both in person, and we also are live streaming this to folks online. So welcome to those folks who couldn't make it out here in person tonight. So this evening you're going to have an opportunity to gain insights from the Animal Services team and to ask questions about urban coyotes in Mississauga. Information is going to include things like coyote behavior, safety tips, and outlining how to report coyote sightings and encounters. Before we begin, though, I would like to acknowledge the lands that we're gathering on today. We acknowledge the lands which constitute the present-day City of Mississauga as part of the Treaty of Traditional Territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot nations. We recognize these peoples and their ancestors as peoples who inhabit these lands since time immemorial. The City of Mississauga is home to many global Indigenous peoples. As a municipality, the City of Mississauga is actively working towards reconciliation by confronting our past and our present, providing space for Indigenous peoples within their territory to recognize and uphold their treaty rights and to support Indigenous peoples. We formally recognize the Anishinaabe origins of our name and continue to make Mississauga a safe place for all Indigenous peoples. I'd like to next take an opportunity to welcome the acting mayor and members of council who are present in person and online this evening, demonstrating their support and engagement for this important topic and for this evening's discussion. With us today, we have Acting Mayor and Ward 6 Councillor Joe Hornick. We have Ward 1 Councillor Stephen Dasco. We have Ward 3 Councillor Chris Fonseca. We have Ward 4 Councillor John Kovac, who's online with us, joining us online. Ward 5 Councillor Carolyn Parrish. Ward 7 Councillor Deepika Demirla. And Ward 11 Councillor Brad Butt, who's also joining us online. So before starting the session, there are a couple of quick housekeeping items I'd like to review if you haven't been here before. It's my first time here, beautiful community center. The washrooms are located just outside a door and to the right. So if you, the doors that we came into, they're just to the right of those doors, facing that way. And exit doors, we have, of course, an emergency exit right here to the left of me. And there's a west exit that's down this corridor right outside this door here. And the east entrance is north, straight through the doors and straight through to the other side of the building. So we're really pleased that you've joined us tonight, where you may have a desire to learn more about coyotes in Mississauga and their behaviors, or you may have just come with a specific curiosity or questions related to safety measures on how the city manages coyotes. So tonight's session will begin with a coyote presentation from our Animal Services team. We have Ayla Middleholtz, Supervisor of Enforcement, and Parathan Mohanarajan, our Public Education Officer. They'll both be speaking to our effective coexistence with coyotes here in Mississauga. Following the presentation, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions. All questions should pertain to coyotes or wildlife management. And for those participating in asking questions, we do ask, though, that you do so in a respectful manner and to refrain from shouting out questions or interrupting the speakers during the presentation. A microphone will be available for those in the room who do wish to participate. Just please raise your hand when it comes to that time and someone will run over to you with the mic. I also ask that you keep the lead into your question as short as possible, just in case we have a lot of questions that we want to answer tonight. For those attending online, a similar format's going to be followed. So to ask a question, please use your hand raise button on WebEx, and we'll unmute the microphone and allow you to speak. We'll do our best to alternate between in-person and virtual, and our team will address as many of your questions as we can during the course of the session. For any questions we're not able to get to over the course of the evening, please feel free to reach out directly to Animal Services, online via email or by calling us directly. We will be sharing that contact information in the last slide of the presentation for your information. So without further ado, I am now pleased to turn things over to Ayla and Parathan to begin our presentation. Thank you.
So the eastern coyote, it is a canid species. It was first documented and observed in Canada in between the 1930s and 1940s. So this is a species of coyotes that has been present in this part of North America for nearly 100 years. An inaccurate term that is commonly used for these animals is the term coy wolf. That is not the proper wording for this species, they are eastern coyotes. Okay, so coyotes do tend to thrive in urban settings because there is an abundance of food. So coyotes like living in cities, like Mississauga, because there's lots of food available. Normally, coyotes are scared of humans. They do see humans as a threat or a predator, if you will. But if they get used to being fed by people, they'll lose their fear of humans. Coyotes do mate for life, and they do raise their babies together. It is important to note that coyotes are not one of Canada's 4 rabies vector species. They are not common carriers of the disease. However, important to note that any mammal would be capable of contracting rabies if bitten by an infected animal. Mississauga Animal Services does consistently test any wildlife that is showing symptoms of rabies. Rabies is not prevalent in the city, and the ministry does confirm that by conducting regular testing. So removing and relocating coyotes is not an effective way to control population. There's a lot of research and data to show that it doesn't work to remove them. And so we'll get a little bit more into the details about that. So a little bit more about eastern coyotes. As we mentioned, they're a canid species. They are very smart animals. They would prefer an easy target. So if easily accessible dumped food is available to them, they will take advantage of that. Coyotes are important, though, in controlling pest and rodent populations in our local ecosystems. We really depend on them as an apex predator to clean up for us in terms of our pests and rodents. They're a really important part of the ecosystem. Although they appear very large in the winter, please note that the largest male ever recovered by Animal Services was under 50 pounds. It was 45 pounds. So their winter coat is very thick and bushy, giving them the appearance of a much larger animal, but pound for pound. It's important to just keep in mind that these are not 100-pound animals or anything like that. They're very social animals, and they do communicate with each other, and it can be very loud, the barking and the yipping and the yowling. They're very social amongst their family groups. They don't want to advertise the fact that they've made a kill and are actively eating, because it would draw other predators or competing coyotes from other territories to them. They don't want to share their resources. And so generally, when we hear them vocalizing, although it can sound a little eerie and it's off-putting, generally they are just talking to each other. It's not something that they've just taken down something and are advertising it. So during mating season and when the coyote pups are born, which we call denning season, coyotes can be a little bit more defensive because they are very protective of their young, and raising their young is a top priority for them.
So coyotes in Mississauga. So as the city grows, so does the wildlife population. They've adapted to this environment where they have accessible food sources and accessible sheltering opportunities. So what's happening in the city of Mississauga? These are some of the challenges that we do face in the city: increased wildlife feeding, rodent issues, loss of natural habitat, lack of naturalized spaces, and human activities. A lot of the human activity that we've seen previously in previous years, we do see off-leash dogs in green spaces driving out coyotes into neighboring streets and neighboring communities. Another thing that's happening in addition to all of this is construction. Construction does promote the prevalence of rats or rodents as it disturbs rodent burrows. And also, whenever there's construction inside or around a green space, it often disturbs the natural habitats of all the wildlife in that area, which promotes them or encourages them to disperse from that area. So they try to find refuge or other food sources or sheltering opportunities in nearby areas, and we've seen that a lot. Also, this time of year, it is the winter time. We're transitioning to springtime. The coyotes are going to be more visible. Their coats are much bigger right now during the fall and winter times. It is mating season for them, so they're going to be more active in their populations as they look for a mate. And the prevalence of food in our neighborhoods and areas like that, that's going to definitely encourage them to be spotted in residential areas or where people are present. As you can see this photo here, I don't know if you guys can see this clearly. So there's a building. This is a coyote actually waiting underneath a balcony. It had a food source. So this is one of the many photos that was submitted through our online coyote map. So you can see it had some food. And there's a subsequent photo that's not up here. You can see the coyote actually eating food underneath that balcony. So it does happen in the city. You guys probably don't see it, but from an animal services perspective, we do see it all the time, unfortunately. So let me put the danger into perspective. This is a very interesting chart. So this is the dog bite incidents compared to coyote incidents in the city. So we do our stats every year. So we define a coyote incident as any sort of physical interaction that would include a scratch or bite with a pet or person. So you can see out through the years, in 2020 we had 13 coyote incidents, but we had 110 dog bite incidents, and 70 of those were people, 40 of those were pets. So 2021, 2022, you can see the numbers. And then last year we had 6 incidents for coyote incidents, none on humans. And then for dogs, you can see we had 142. So you are far more likely to get into an incident from a domestic dog than a coyote. So lots of people in Mississauga own a dog, but we accept the risk that a bite or attack can happen no matter how friendly a dog is. That's the difference.
Okay, moving into this graph, another interesting graph. So this is showing you the amount of deceased wildlife that Animal Services removed just last year from city roadways, parks, and private property. This is not showcasing every species because the graph would be far too big. This is the most common species that we're picking up. So you can imagine we're removing quite a large amount of animals every year. So in comparison with the other species, you can see that the coyotes collected is quite low. And although this is not an exact indication of population levels for these species, it does provide a good visual in terms of how many coyotes there may be compared to all of the other common species that we're dealing with in the city. Another important thing to note is that this graph does indicate how much food is available in the city. These are all prey items for a coyote. So it really does show how much food is present without even adding the human food sources that are provided, right? So just going over some of our stats. 1,721 coyote reports. A coyote report includes sighting, sick and injured reported coyotes, deceased coyotes, and also just any time that Animal Services officer is dispatched. So that's our total number for coyote reports last year. A proactive patrol, as we can see, our department did 649 proactive patrols. A patrol that is proactive is targeted to a particular location and time frame. Officers attend patrols, calls permitting, and monitor for bylaw violations. And in this particular case, this is just our feeding patrols. So you can imagine our patrols in general, we have many, many bylaws. This is only one that we've been focusing on, right? So we specifically target addresses and locations and timeframes where feeding is suspected. And as we kind of went over, there were 6 pet incidents that were reported to Animal Services last year. They were fully investigated as a result. So we can only map something if it is reported to us so that we do a formal investigation. If it is not formally reported to us, we're unable to put it on our interactive map. The common factor that certainly increases the risk of incident for your pets is leaving them unattended and allowing them to be off leash or at large. That is pets who are not under direct care and control of their owner are at the greatest risk. And so generally, this is what we're seeing as the contributing factor to pet-related incidents. Okay, so as we talked about earlier, when coyotes find out that there's an easy source of food provided by a human, they will take advantage of it. It does not take long for these animals, much like a dog, to learn and have that wiring of their brain learn, oh, a human equals being fed. So when they're being fed by humans, they won't hunt their usual prey as much because they have a full belly, and they will start depending on humans for food, which is, as you can imagine, extremely problematic. So a little bit more about the wildlife feeding, because ultimately this is kind of our root cause of unwanted behaviors from coyotes. We want coyotes to hunt wildlife, squirrels, rabbits, skunks, raccoons, rats. We want to use them to our advantage to control rodent and pest populations. So even the simple act of feeding the birds can contribute to coyote concerns. Seed spills on the ground. It attracts small prey, like rats, and then it therefore attracts coyotes. We all have to kind of remember the importance of ecosystems, and everything is connected. Gathering prey, like pigeons, for instance, if you're feeding pigeons, gathering them all in one spot, it dramatically increases the spread of disease. And as I'm sure many of you are aware, avian flu is a concern, and this type of intentional feeding and gathering of big groups of birds is very dangerous. They will swap diseases very easily, whereas if they're left to forage naturally, it greatly reduces the risk. They're not sharing such tight quarters, and therefore you don't have that ripple effect of attracting predators like coyotes.
Okay, so let me put this video into context. So this was a video of someone feeding a coyote in Mississauga that was posted on a very prominent social media site. As you can see in the video, they're feeding chocolate Timbits to a coyote. So they are glorifying the feeding of wildlife, predatory animals like coyotes.
And creating a very dangerous situation.
So this particular coyote became very, very food conditioned. As you can see from this video, there was a large number of people feeding this particular coyote. There were people from the nearby businesses feeding it. There was people from there would be, I believe, car meets in this particular area as well. So people out of town were feeding it. So it got very food conditioned. And then we started getting reports about this particular coyote running after people. So it was becoming a public safety issue. So this is one of the part. So this is part of our response. So I'll let you guys see this. This is our supervisor. She's putting down food for a coyote. This is that same coyote. As you can see it approaching, and then it comes towards the food, and then you see the supervisor go and scare it. So that is part of our escalated hazing. So when we get involved in a situation, so this situation, we intervened. We were able to do 24/7 patrols. This patrol actually happened around 12 midnight. We actually worked with the local community. We worked with the businesses. We worked with the nearby corporations there. We worked with the restaurants in the area. We left information for everybody. We did 24/7 patrols, and we were able to safely encourage the coyote to move along, and it was a successful operation as no one was injured in this whole situation. So this is why we need people to report any sort of, it doesn't matter how minuscule it is, any sort of coyote sighting or report, we want that so we can intervene before it gets escalated into something similar to this situation. So this is the question that we get asked all the time, every day. That's most of my job. Why can't we remove or destroy or relocate the coyotes to outside of Mississauga? So trapping and relocation is very complex with coyotes. So we adhere to the stipulations of the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Act. So the first part of this is any sort of captured wildlife can be only relocated to a max of 1 kilometer. So with coyotes have been documented traveling hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. In fact, the Ministry of Natural Resources actually came to Mississauga between the years of 2012 and 2014. They actually put tracking collars on some coyotes and then tracked their movements from Mississauga to the United States border and then back up north again. So even relocating them 20 kilometers, 50 kilometers might not make a difference. As long as there's attractants and sheltering opportunities available, they'll just keep coming back. So that's one aspect of the relocation or removal equation. The second aspect is coyotes are very, very difficult to trap and capture. The most effective means to actually trap or capture a coyote is the use of a body gripping trap like a snare trap or a coney bear trap. We do have some examples over there that were picked up in Mississauga if you want to see them after the presentation. So these traps are illegal under the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Act because they can seriously harm a child, they can harm pets, and they can seriously harm wildlife. So implementing these type of traps in any urban environment, you're bound to hurt more of the public than capturing the target coyotes. Humane removal is not an option. Coyotes are very smart. They will not go into a humane trap. You even have videos of these coyotes just defecating beside these traps because they're too smart to go in there. Those traps have been very effective in capturing raccoons and cats, but the coyotes just stay out of them.
Okay, so we want to kind of show you some of the attractants and feeding that we're dealing with. Just a little bit further to Pero's point, I do want to just advise that there have been several documented large-scale culls, which is a lethal removal of these animals. It's happened in many Canadian and US cities in the past, and it has proven extremely ineffective. These coyotes, the coyote population rebounds pretty quickly. Female coyotes actually have a very interesting biological sense for room in their territory. So instead of having 4 pups the following spring after a large-scale cull, for instance, they'll have 8, and they will repopulate very quickly. So just to add to that, that's another reason why the culling and lethal removal is just not an option. So.
And one more thing. So this is a coyote with a snare trap on it. You can see it right there. So you can see how much damage it's done to its face. So oftentimes with snare traps, they either leave them on the ground or hang them from a branch. So like a coyote or a dog or someone who's running can get it over their neck oftentimes. And that's actually happened in the city of Toronto, I think, a couple of years ago.
It's very, very dangerous.
So we were able to capture this coyote because of how compromised it was. We did take it to a rehabilitation facility. They did have to put it down or euthanize it because of the injuries sustained. It could not be rehabilitated.
Okay, so back to kind of showcasing, these are some photos of dumping of food that just occurred just in the last year. These are not old photos, this is very recent. The park sign is there just to showcase this raw meat that's just been kind of hung from the sign there. So as we've mentioned, we did have 284 calls from the public last year regarding feeding activity, that every single one was investigated. These are direct examples of these attractants that are being offered to all of wildlife in this city. So providing these types of food sources is quite dangerous, and as we've kind of covered, it can lead to a multitude of unwanted wildlife behaviors. It's also very dangerous for our domestic pets and children, as most of these raw meat sources that are left are expired. They're full of bacteria. It's just, we don't want this laying out in our city parks and streets. We move into some more examples of what kind of is going on out there. So it's not uncommon to see people feeding wildlife, especially birds. However, while it may seem harmless, it has negative consequences, and it includes serious health and safety concerns for residents and wildlife alike. So items that are continually being left for wildlife include birdseed, chunks of meat, as you can see, crackers, fruit, fast food, hamburgers, fries. So please note the vandalized sign and the dump sign, that the seed that's been dumped directly in front of a do not feed sign. So Just to point out that providing food to any wildlife, even the birds, is causing much more harm than good. It is important to note that any seed left behind on the ground will attract rats. Center photo, that is a group of rats that are taking advantage of dump seed in a parking lot in Mississauga. So these human-provided food sources ultimately support very high populations of pest and prey items, which then obviously have a direct effect on our coyote population. So it is important to note that at 9 months of age, juvenile coyotes generally will depart from their family to strike out to find their own territory. When there is a gross abundance of food, however, it's not always necessary to leave your family so young. Why would you leave your parents if there was enough food for everybody, right? So these food sources are extremely detrimental. So our coyote response, we're gonna go, soon we're gonna go over this framework that we've put on everybody's chairs. So Animal Services does not intervene with healthy wildlife, okay? So the picture that we see here is of a very sick coyote that had a disease called mange. Animal Services will certainly intervene in cases like this because animals suffering from mange won't survive, ultimately, especially through the winter months. So mange is actually a skin condition. It causes extreme discomfort and itching. It is small mites burrowing into the skin. It causes hair loss, scabs, open sores. Mange has a very distinct smell, and it can limit the coyote's ability to hunt. And so prey will smell the animal coming, which reduces the element of surprise in terms of hunting. So this is why intervention is absolutely essential for cases like this. We also intervene in situations where the coyote is in a very inappropriate location. If a coyote is lingering in a schoolyard, for instance, we will certainly respond and apply some adverse conditioning, which is, what we kind of went over when we scared the coyote away from the food, because it sends the coyote a very direct message: you are not welcome in this location. And so the point is to communicate very, very clearly that humans are scary and we need distance. You need to keep away from us, right? So. Into our framework. So this is a council-approved coyote response framework. Please note that we have very specific terminology that we use. So if somebody simply observes a coyote, it's mapped accordingly, okay? Now, an encounter, moving into the green area, is defined as a coyote that has entered a yard or space where pets and people are present. And this can also include a coyote that may be following somebody, approaching somebody, but not making any, contact, causing any injuries or incident. So in response to encounters, we map it. We do a full site inspection. We provide educational material to the neighborhood. And often our site inspections will produce findings like a nearby attractant or perhaps a den nearby. There's usually a reason why this coyote has entered a certain space, and often food is your main contributor. So it's important to note that shadowing is a term used. It is a natural documented behavior that coyotes have. And I myself have been shadowed with my dog. It's often you're going to be shadowed if you have a canine, like a dog with you. It is not a nice experience. I fully acknowledge that it's uncomfortable when a coyote is kind of trailing behind you. And like I said, I've experienced it firsthand with my own dog. This particular behavior is primarily seen during the denning season. And so the coyote is not following you because it's stalking you and it wants to eat you. The coyote is following you to ensure that you, and especially your dog, does not become a direct threat to its babies. Okay, so the coyote will follow you for a certain extent of time. Once you're far enough away from a den site, it'll just disappear. It's just gone all of a sudden. You're a safe distance away from its young, and it's satisfied that you're no longer a threat. So I do want to fully acknowledge it is not a comfortable experience, But when you understand the behavior a little more and you're able to say, oh, like it's just making sure I'm not going to hurt it, it helps. It helps you to calm down a little bit and realize, you know what, this is a natural behavior and I know how to handle this. I'm just going to continue on my way and it'll stop following me soon. Moving into the yellow section of our response table. So this is the section that pertains to pet incidents. So a pet incident is defined as a pet who either is injured or killed by a coyote. Our response includes involving the ward counselor. The ward counselor is notified immediately. We obviously put it on our interactive map and do a full inspection, an investigation. We educate the surrounding neighborhood, and we will have some proactive patrolling in the area, as well as escalated adverse conditioning, hazing, where we can apply it. Unattended pets are at the largest risk. Small dogs like Dachshunds, Pomeranians, Shih Tzus, Terriers, they may be considered prey items due to their size. A coyote doesn't necessarily know that that's a beloved family member, right? It's just the size of prey. Large dogs like golden retrievers, German shepherds, Australian shepherds, they can be viewed as a threat in terms of territory, in terms of a threat to possibly injure or hurt a pup. So if an off-leash dog pursues or approaches a coyote, the coyote will likely flee and try to get away from the dog. Now, if the dog continues to pursue this animal, once the coyote gets to a point where it kind of feels safe, let's say it rendezvous with a family member or a mate, they will defend themselves. And so this is exactly why keeping dogs on leash is so important. We often get the question, oh, like the coyote lured my dog into the woods. Well, the coyote was trying to get away from your dog. And when it got to a point that it felt like it could defend itself, it did. So that's kind of the reality there. Pet incidents are more likely to occur during the denning season when pups are involved, And coyote parents will be defensive of their den sites, and because protecting their pups is a priority, just like any of your parents, I'm sure you kind of understand that protecting your young is just a biological innate response, right? So other dogs in the area will be viewed as a kind of direct threat to the young. And so if you're aware that a coyote has created a den in a certain naturalized area nearby, give some space. Walk in a different area for, a couple months while they're raising their young. It's just best to kind of keep our distance if we know that there's a den site and to avoid any further incident for your pets. Moving into the last kind of section of the framework. So potential human incident that we see here in the orange, that is what we were watching on the video. That food-conditioned coyote that was eating the Timbits, that was a potential human incident waiting to happen, so heavily food-conditioned. We do respond with advanced behavioral reconditioning, as you kind of saw in our videos, and it was successful. We ultimately told that coyote, kind of rewired that coyote's brain to say, actually, human-provided food source isn't great. It's actually quite scary, and you don't want to go near somebody that's trying to feed you, because every time we put some food down, scared it away, right? So kind of turning that stimuli into a scary thing, right? The last little piece here in the red, our human incidents are defined as a person who is bitten by a coyote. This is the only time when removal of a healthy coyote, that individual coyote, would be considered, okay? Because we're potentially talking about an animal that is so food conditioned that it's bitten a human, and of course at that point removal is certainly considered. And according to the data and the research, human feeding, like I said, is often the root cause of behavior, aggressive and bold coyote behavior. So just to point out, Mississauga has at no time removed coyotes on a large scale. We've never removed healthy coyotes from the community. We certainly, as I mentioned, remove sick and injured coyotes for the purposes of rehabilitation and return. And it is worth noting that Sometimes media outlets can exaggerate the severity of these coyote encounters, and instead of calling it an encounter as per kind of our terminology, it might be called an attack, right? And it leads to some unnecessary fear and concern because they may use the word attack, but nobody was injured. There was not even a scratch on anybody. So we want to just make sure that it's very important to approach news stories with a very critical lens and to consult multiple sources.
So our coyote response framework is a very proactive process. So these are some of the initiatives that we do before to get that awareness and education out to the community. One thing that we take real big pride on is our ARC, or Animal Awareness and Responsibility campaign. This is where our officers actually go door to door in the community to spread awareness, educate, and provide tips to keep families and pets safe. Our program is based on science, facts, and best practices, and other municipalities have actually taken parts of our program and implemented it into their own. Should I let you know what city? It's one close by. So yes, so what we have done, we have done a large amount of outreach, especially to our schools, because we know our most vulnerable people, our children, need to know this information. So that we want to empower them with what to do, like exactly what we're telling you guys to do. We're telling them about coyote behavior, the time of year, what's happening, why are coyotes so prevalent, not to feed the wildlife, especially coyotes, and what to do if you encounter a coyote. So we've actually completed 39 presentations last year for both the school boards of the Peel District School Board and the Peel Catholic District School Board, where we had an estimated 5,000 students attend our presentations for coyote safety. So we are very, very proud of that, just because we know the kids need to have this information, the staff need to have that information, plus the school community needs to have that information. Because oftentimes we do see situations where a lot of this feeding, where people are actively feeding coyotes, may happen on school property. So we have made significant improvements to our coyote strategy. We've been working on it for years, and we continue to improve it. So we have a fine of $365 for someone who is observed feeding any sort of wildlife or dumping food to feed wildlife. It can go up to $100,000 for a summons to court, depending on the situation, if it's a chronic feeder, and how the judge wants to take it that way. So this is a community issue, so it can't just be Animal Services trying to, you can't charge your way through something like this. This is all about education. So we have to get the community on board with not leaving out food, not providing any sort of intentional food sources like directly feeding these animals, or indirect food sources, so like leaving food out, throwing out garbage, or not taking care of compost appropriately, not picking up after, or feeding your pets outdoors. That can definitely be things that can attract the coyotes. I would really encourage everyone here to read what other municipalities are doing to address their coyote concerns, because Mississauga this is not a unique situation to Mississauga. Other municipalities in Canada, the US, the world are experiencing the same type of issues. So this is my pride and joy, the coyote map. So this does help Animal Services address concerns and intervene in situations before they even become situations. So I encourage all of you, no matter how minuscule the report is, if you see coyotes all the time, don't feel like it's not important. It does help us allocate resources to areas where we can do our outreach and enforcement. So just previously, we've gotten concerns from a particular area in Mississauga that seemed to be underserved because we never really had a lot of information going out to that particular community. So the map has helped us address that. So we have targeted that area for outreach and our patrols to try to address their concerns. So there is a demo on YouTube where you can see how to use our map. You can go check on YouTube and type in Mississauga Coyote map, how to use. So if you guys don't know how to use the map, you can definitely go there and it'll tell you how to do it.
And just to note that all of those dots do not represent that many coyotes. One dot, like 10 dots could be one coyote, right? Your neighbor sees a coyote, enters it into the map. 10 minutes later, it comes through your yard, you enter it into the map. So it's just important to note that that does not represent how many coyotes are in the city. That just represents how much they travel in the city, really.
So, as you guys already probably know, so we do have bylaws in the city to keep the community, and keep our pets safe. So these are some of the things that can help us keep our pets safe and our families safe. So remember what I was talking about with the incidents. So the factors that increase the likelihood of an incident is when you have your dog off leash, or you're permitting it to run at large in a green space or a trail or park. So that's why we do have a bylaw to have your dog on a 6-foot leash. Extended leashes, you can't keep your dogs under control on an extended leash. So Ayla's gonna be my dog today. So this is about 2 meters. So if Ayla is more than 2 meters away, like over there, and I'm over here, how much control over Ayla do I have? Or if I'm walking this way, I don't know what Ayla's doing behind me. I can barely even feel her tugging on my leash. So it's very good to have your dog under control, and it keeps your family, keeps the community, keeps other dogs, and keeps your dog safe.
Cleaning up pet waste as well is a huge one. Many people don't know that dog waste in particular is actually very high in like nutrients, because we do feed our dogs fairly like processed diets if you're feeding dry food anyways, and they're a huge dog waste is actually an attractant to rats. Rats will consume dog waste, and so again we're talking about rats, drawing coyotes, etc. So removing pet waste is very important. And in certain situations, a coyote may even consume it if it's high in nutrients and undigested food. So just another.
Yeah, and let's not forget about cats. We tend to do that because cats, we don't really own cats. Cats own us. So cats should be kept indoors. It is the bylaw. They are supposed to be required to stay on your property. They are not permitted to roam the neighborhoods. Indoor cats are safest. An outdoor cat has many dangers, not just coyotes.
Mm-hmm. So moving into safety tips, let's arm you with some really great information to keep you safe. So. In terms of coyote encounters and sightings, just seeing them nearby, give them space, stay calm, remind yourself that you sit atop the food chain. You're a human, you sit right at the top. Be assertive. It's important to communicate to these animals in a language that they can understand. So being assertive, loud, and erratic will tell the animal that you are unpredictable and scary, a little bit scary, and they will likely rethink coming any closer. And in terms of children, it's a really common question, children's safety. I think it should just be noted that parents should always be supervising small children regardless of the situation. Yes, children, of course, they're physically smaller, but they're human. And it's to be remembered that they have human characteristics. They smell like a human. They sound like a human. They're up on 2 legs. They do not look like a typical prey item for a coyote. So coyotes, even though our children are small, I'm a mother of a 3- and 6-year-old, and so I get it, but they are not seen as a prey item. Children are not seen as prey. So being a parent of 2 small children, I do live right next to a naturalized area. I have taken the opportunity to teach my children about wildlife, and specifically coyotes. We have coyotes that rendezvous in our park almost every night, and they're so loud. And I myself enjoy it because I understand that this is like a vocalization and a social gathering of a family. It's just it's a great opportunity to teach my children, okay, if you see one of these guys in the park, don't run away. You never turn your back on any canid. If you've ever run away from a dog, it chased you. I'm almost like certain that it pursued you, right? Canids have a prey instinct that if something is running away from them, they want to follow it. So arming ourselves and our children with the proper information on how to act around wildlife and domestic animals, because as we saw, our domestic dogs pose quite a large threat to us in terms of safety. So the more we know, the less there is to really fear, right? And so that's kind of what we want to arm everybody with the proper information. So if a coyote is actually trying to approach you in some way, let's say we're dealing with our guy that was getting fed Timbits and he thinks, oh, maybe this person's gonna feed me. Your goal is to scare the coyote away, okay? Don't turn your back, don't run away. Prey items such as rabbits, squirrels, they often have a high-pitched distress call, so we do not encourage whistles, because it could even just make the coyote even more curious, like, oh, what's that sound? So what we want to encourage is something that makes you look bigger and louder. One of my favorite tools as a road officer was always just a garbage bag. Fits in your pocket, like a big garbage bag. It's light, fits in your pocket, it's not cumbersome at all. If you've got a coyote kind of like coming towards you, you take that out, you snap it open, oh. They turn tail and run. They really do. So additionally, we get a lot of people, oh, well, I walk with a stick or I walk with a cane. That's fine, but very unlikely that a coyote has ever had a really negative experience with one of those things. Like, very unlikely that a coyote's ever been hit with a stick, for instance, right? And also, I don't want a coyote close enough to you to hit them with a stick. So it's a much better idea to use tools like umbrellas. They pop open and shut, plus there's a little bit of noise that goes with it, and it's very unsettling for a coyote. They don't like umbrellas. Like I said, the garbage bag's a great tool. Any canine, canid is going to hate the sound of pennies in a pop can, for instance, not a nice sound for them. So these are the types of deterrents that we would encourage rather than using a stick or what have you. So this is this is me in my garbage bag. So the coyote left pretty quickly. I think it's very important to give you some context here because a coyote expert, for instance, watching this would be like, why were you hazing that animal in a naturalized area? That's where we want to keep them. Yeah, to my back was a playground and a school. So I was getting the coyote away as it was lingering inappropriately in the area. And so it's very important when we're applying this adverse conditioning. Once the coyote was kind of out of sight, adverse conditioning stops. Don't keep pursuing the coyote. It will be very confusing for the coyote. So once we get the animal into a naturalized, appropriate location, then we communicate the clear message to them that you're unwelcome in this location. We're going to leave you alone once you get over here.
The video went very fast. Do you guys want to see it again?
Yeah, for sure.
Can you play it again?
He just disappears. They hate the sound. They really do. It's not something that they hear. Car horns. You got to think about what these animals would hear on a regular basis and what they'd be accustomed to, and then things that would be very unaccustomed to, like the garbage bag, right? So really effective tool. Okay, so thank you for joining us. To gain a better understanding of Mississauga's wildlife, including coyotes, and to learn how to exist in harmony, it's essential to acquire knowledge and take necessary precautions to ensure safety. Make sure to visit our website, mississauga.ca. And if you ever have any wildlife-related concerns or questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. As you can see, we've got an expert here on our education officer. So thank you.
Yeah. And our Coyote map URL, okay? Everyone use that.
That's the Coyote. That's to reach the interactive Coyote map. Yep. I think there's one more.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah. So thank you for coming, and we'll pass it back over to Jay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Aylin Parathan. That was very informative. I always learn something new whenever I watch this presentation. So as mentioned, we're going to actually move along to Q&A on matters specifically related to coyotes and any questions that may have come up during the course of the presentation. So in addition actually to Aylin Parathan, there's myself and our Director of Enforcement, Georgios Thinos, who is here to answer any questions if there's anything that you wanted to direct to us. A reminder for those in person, if you have a question, please raise your hand and one of our runners the microphone will run over to you. We'd ask that you just provide your first name and the ward that you reside in and then question away. For those online, please raise your hand to be unmuted, or if you prefer, you can actually type your question into the box that's made available to you, the chat box, and we'll raise it on your behalf. Welcoming questions.
I'll let it go. Oh, thanks.
Sir, in the back? In the back, sir?
Oh.
Was she? I'm so sorry. There you go.
Oh, Danielle's good.
Kim, Ward 3, I'm wondering if you tag or track them at all.
We don't. Any coyote that would be wearing some type of tracking collar would be under the ministry's privy. We do not do that. Our tracking method is the interactive coyote map to give us an idea of their general, yeah.
And the unfortunate thing is they don't share that information with us, so yeah, so.
Do we know numbers?
It's very hard to give a general population number, but in terms of the graph that we showed earlier, how we only picked up a certain number of coyotes, that number actually hasn't changed since 2016. So in 2016, we picked up 25 deceased coyotes in the city. So it's a fairly consistent number, which I think would be data that we could kind of speak to in terms of stability, and the fact that, you know, the more we develop and the more that the naturalized areas kind of shrink, they're going to be more visible. Not necessarily more of them, just more visible. And so we think that that data is something that we can kind of speak to in terms of the population kind of being somewhat stable, right? You've got 25 in 2016 and right across until 2023, it really hasn't changed. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Dalius, Ward 3. What I heard from you this evening was the citizens of Mississauga are expected to coexist with these coyotes, and you gave us useful information how that would look like and what to do. But do you visualize a situation where that coexistence may become intolerable? And what does that look like?
Like in what regard? Like a heavily conditioned, because if these...
For example, let's say 2 or 3 kids got attacked and mauled. Is that tolerable?
No, well, what we went over in the framework there is when we have a human incident, that is when we would certainly consider removal of that particular animal, because that would indicate that that particular animal is far too conditioned to live safely in our neighborhoods. But before that ever happens, we try to prevent that from ever happening, of course. And
okay, but there's no guarantee that you would prevent every single incident from escalating to something that's not acceptable.
So wildlife is inherently unpredictable. So that's why we're very proactive with our program. So that's why we try to get all that awareness and education out to the public, schools, so that everyone is aware of what to do, how coyotes behave, how to keep their families and pets safe, so we can prevent a situation from escalating. But if it does escalate, we do have a council-approved framework that can respond to those type of situations. And I just keep hitting on the reporting. We need people to report this so we are aware, so we can intervene in those situations before they get that escalated, and it becomes that we have that type of response in the end.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, go ahead, Rebecca. Yeah. Oh, we got another one down here, Daniel.
I have 3 questions. Should I ask all 3 or?
Sure.
Okay, so first thing, you talk about families, but you don't talk about packs. Are coyotes pack animals or no?
Not generally. They're not pack animals the way that wolves are. You would see potentially a family group. So you would, in a territory, the most ideal situation is that you have your mated pair controlling the territory. they will reproduce. Like I said, at 9 months of age, the juveniles generally will strike out to find their own territories. But when they have their pups, the pups do stay with them for a full 9 months. So it's not necessarily uncommon to see 4 or 5 coyotes together. They would be a direct, immediate family group. We do not see packs the way that wolves have aunts and uncles and cousins. That they're not. They're much more individual hunters.
So second question is, you mentioned coy wolves was a specious term. I remember reading an article about coy wolves which are supposedly interbreeding between coyotes and wolves. Some pack in the Don River Valley area?
You want to speak to that? I think it's the David Suzuki.
I'm not aware of anything
Okay.
like that.
Not aware of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and third question is, just to be specific, when you say removal, you mean culling?
Yeah, if there was an incident that required removal of the animal, that would be a lethal removal.
Okay.
Yes.
And final question, do you have any idea of round numbers of the coyote population?
No, as we were just kind of saying to the last resident, it's not possible to really track an exact population number, but like we said, by analyzing our data in terms of deceased wildlife that we have removed every year, that number hasn't changed. So in 2016, we removed 25 deceased animals from the city that year. Last year, we removed 25 deceased coyotes from the city. So it at least gives some level of indication of a stability and not this direct increase in population that many people believe is occurring.
So you can't speak about whether there are hundreds or thousands or more?
That would be a very high number. No, we don't have the capability of identifying exactly a population number.
There's no mechanism to actually track these coyotes. So oftentimes they're very transient. You're getting coyotes up from Toronto coming to Mississauga, going to Oakville, Burlington, or they're going from Mississauga to Brampton and other municipalities. So that's why it's so very hard to track them by any one municipality.
Yeah. Yep, go ahead.
And if I could add, just as a consequence of their territorial nature, it would be highly unlikely you're going to have hundreds and thousands within just the geography of Mississauga. So we can rest assured that it's probably not in that type of number, and our data kind of suggests that as well.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. And we actually have someone online.
Oh.
So we'd like to actually pull in, we have some questions online. We will move back to in-house as well, but we've had some folks waiting online.
Thanks, Jay. We have a question from Nalina. I allow my 20-pound dog to run freely in my fenced backyard. Should I be worried about a coyote jumping over the 4 to 5 foot fence? How many incidents involve coyotes attacking pets in fenced yards?
So, do you want to speak
Yes.
to?
Okay. So according to our stats, like we do every year, and whenever there's an incident, it's an incident. The incident involves a coyote and a dog. The situational factors that increase the risk of your dog getting into an incident with a coyote is when your dog is unattended, even on your own property, either front yard, backyard, doesn't matter. And the other situational factor is when you allow your dog to run at large in a green space trail park. So to keep that risk low, we get this messaging out. We try to get as much out as possible. It's even on the community center screens right now. Supervise your pets. That will definitely keep your pet safe.
Yeah.
Because the coyote does not want to get into a confrontation with a human, so that's why they're going to try to avoid an area where a human is present. So it's always good. I know it's not the most ideal, but according to our stats, like I said, we do them every year, and whenever there is an incident with a coyote, it's usually with a dog, and these situational factors increase the risk of that incident.
So to this resident, if you're present in the yard, especially if it's you and your friend in the yard and you have 2 humans nearby this dog that's getting some exercise in a fenced-in yard, that you're really reducing any risk. It's a pretty safe situation if you're physically with your dog. Okay, are we moving back to
One more online.
one more online?
Yeah, we have a few questions online here. A question from Jeanette. How can you identify a den if it is not visible, but the coyotes can be heard and seen in the area?
We've been into a lot of situations where we get questions if there's a potential den. It's very, very hard to locate a den. It might be underneath a tree. It just might be just a bunch of bushes. That can oftentimes be used as a den or just a a resting area. We've actually seen coyotes actually make dens or resting areas in culverts and things and other unideal areas. So there's no exact way to determine if this particular area is going to be used as a den. It's very difficult unless you see them like there in the same spot for not moving around for a good couple of weeks. That may indicate it, but there's no one situation or one area that you can like point out and be like, that's a den.
Okay.
A couple more. We have a couple of folks online.
We do.
who are
We have a
live.
few more questions online. I'll turn it over to Janice. Janice, we'll unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question. All right. We also have a question from Catherine. Catherine, we'll go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question. All right. What we can do is we do have some written questions. Maybe we'll go to one more written
We
question.
have another
and then
question,
bring it
yeah.
back to in-house. There's a
Perfect.
question here. Do backyard composters and veggie gardens attract coyotes?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yes. So as we know, coyotes can pretty much eat anything. So anything that we can eat, coyotes will eat. So anything edible could be an attractant for coyotes. That includes the backyard vegetable gardens. If you have a fruit tree or a fruit bush that's dropping fruit, that's an attractant for coyotes. The fallen birdseed from a bird feeder, that's an attractant for coyotes. And the smaller wildlife that they prey on. So yes.
Those items are also an attractant for rodents too. So if you have a vegetable garden, you got to make sure that any ripe fruit is removed immediately. Like as soon as it's ready to come off, remove it. Don't let things rot in the garden because that will inevitably attract rats and other pest items and therefore potentially coyotes. Yeah, one more.
All right. We have Janice, who is hopefully going to be able to ask her a question. Janice, go ahead.
We had some people come to our front door from the city, and they said that we, in order to protect ourselves because a dog got bit on our street, to blow a whistle. And when you go for a walk, to take a whistle. But you said, no, it's better to use a big plastic bag or an umbrella, open and shut, open and shut. So I just wanted to clarify that. Plus, the teachers at Cannoli Public School, when I've come to talk to them as friends, they said they had them come to their school and they said to blow a whistle, and the kids were given whistles at Cannoli.
Yeah, no, whistles aren't ideal. They're not going to do any harm, but they're not the most ideal deterrent. Yeah.
Okay, and what about the bird feeder? If we have a bird feeder,
So in terms of a the bylaw is very specific in this regard. A hanging bird feeder that is not accessible to any other wildlife other than a bird is permitted. However, any seed spillage that's falling on the ground should be removed. We suggest daily to be cleaning up under your bird feeder. So if you're keeping your bird feeder in good repair and you're washing it, because again, we gotta kind of discuss the avian flu point that maybe communal bird feeders aren't ideal right now for wild birds. But the important part is the seed that falls to the ground, if it is not being removed regularly, would be considered an attractant and would be technically in violation of the feeding bylaw.
All right. We also have Catherine, who's going to go ahead and ask her question. Catherine, over to you.
When you and your dog were being trailed by the coyote, I wondered, did you haze it or did you just continue walking forward with your back to the coyote?
I don't turn my back completely to the coyote. I kept my eyes on it to make sure that it knew that I knew that it was there. But no, with my dog with me, I did not apply any adverse conditioning because I don't want any negative association made to my dog, because the last thing we want is for the coyote to associate negativity with my dog and then potentially want to be more territorial with dogs. So I did keep an eye on it and made sure that it was at a distance. And like I said, once I kind of got to the end of the park, it was gone. It was like he materialized into thin air. So never turn your back directly, but no, I would not apply the adverse conditioning with my dog in hand. It's just too complicated.
And I want to add, I know a lot of people's first instinct is to turn around or run from a coyote. Do not do that. Like dogs, they actually might chase you. So what you want to do, we talked about it in the presentation, stop, focus on the coyote, look big, and you want to be loud. You don't want to think you're loud. You want to be loud. You need to be loud. And then just make a lot of sudden movements, and then the coyote will move on, and then you just go about your day, and you can report it to us after when you get a chance to.
Okay, we're back in the room for questions in the room.
Okay, yep,
So this next one is more so a comment rather than a question.
okay.
Hi, I'm Steve from Ward 1.
Hi, Steve.
First and foremost, I want to thank you on what I thought was a superb presentation.
Thank you.
You know, teaching and educating all of us to learn to coexist with coyotes and coexist with wildlife in the city. And frankly, that's what makes my neighborhood in Applewood such a pleasant place to be. I have observed coyotes, and I've done exactly what you've said. Never had a problem with my dog. The other thing, I want to commend the city on what I see as an incredibly progressive framework for dealing with this, including the education program. And also in terms of looking at the offending animal that's a problem as opposed to targeting all the animals that don't deserve that to be targeted. And from what I understand, there hasn't been any people who have actually been bitten, but if that was the case, that particular individual, the offending individual, would be culled or eliminated in one way or another. And by analogy, I think that's the way we work with people. We don't target groups, we target offending individuals. And I think that's a very progressive way, and I'm glad to hear that you've done it that way. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, we've got a couple more hands up over here, Danielle. Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
Lovely presentation. Very informative. Thank you kindly. I have a couple of questions. I'm outside with my dog who's 75 pounds and disabled.
Okay.
And the coyote is closer than the stage to me on my sidewalk. So luckily, my dog did not see him, but I did. Too close, too unnerving, waving the arm, shouting, and then he finally left.
Yep. Yeah, and that doesn't sound completely uncommon. I will walk my dog, and a coyote will be in the park, fairly close by, and we acknowledge each other, and I continue on my way. And so, unless the coyote is really trying to approach you or showing signs that it's going to get closer, then that's where I would, potentially, like I said, the coins or the coins in an old pop can. Really handy just to be like, shh, do you know what I mean? And not have to manipulate the leash. And it's very hard when you have a big dog on your side, right, to do this properly, right? So a tool that makes a little bit of noise is helpful as well.
You could even do something like, if you have a cell phone, get a loud throttling noise on YouTube or something, and put it up in the air. The key is using something loud and it sounds threatening to the animal that it may have not been exposed to before. Like whistles and horns might have diminished returns because they are urban coyotes. They experience these sounds all the time. So that's why you want to use a variety of different sounds or resources to try to deter them.
And I'm seeing more coyotes daylight hours now. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock, and 10 o'clock in the morning. They don't seem to be nocturnal anymore.
It is mating season, so we're a little bit. They're quite a bit more active during this time of year.
And also, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, so also what's happening as well is if they have food sources, they're looking for food sources. If they've already been successful finding a food source somewhere else, they're going to be, let's say if they found food in a backyard, they're going to continue going to other backyards because they've already been successful finding food in one backyard.
Yeah. So please put it on the map, something like that, and indicate the time that you saw it, because if that coyote is kind of going to, our biggest red flag is a coyote that's revisiting the same location at the same time. We want to know about that because that really indicates somebody that's feeding.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, if it's like a residential area or commercial area, a coyote should not be in the same spot at the same time every day. That triggers a response from us, so we want to investigate what's going on.
Okay. If we look at basic math, and if we have 50 coyotes in Mississauga, half of them female, so now we're at 25. And these 25 ladies have 4 babies each. We're doing some multiplication now, so we're doubling our numbers. Instead of 50, now we have 100. The next year, are we doubling?
No, as I stated, the juveniles branch out to find their own territories. You can't sustain these large numbers in the territory that they have. So although, you know, sometimes it might take a little longer if there's an abundant food source in that particular area for the juveniles to branch out, find their own territories, they will, because their parents will kick them out. Because when the parents go and have their next litter, goodbye, we did our job with you, off you go, and they will have to strike out and find their own territory. And it's important to remember that you're also going to have older coyotes, you know, dying of age, getting hit on the roads. There's other, you know, dangers that are ultimately removing these guys from the environment, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
One last question, and I'll give up the mic. I had read online very recently that January 31st, there was an attack in South Mississauga, Queensway and Cliff Road. A gentleman walking his smallish dog, and the coyote came after them and was tangled in his legs while he was trying to get it away from him and the dog. Can you speak to that?
We can't actually, because it wasn't formally reported to us. We watched the same clip that you watched.
Okay.
We do not know who this individual is. We have no way of contacting them. So no, that particular, we cannot speak to it, unfortunately. Yeah. They did not report it to Animal Services, no. Go ahead, yeah.
Hi, I'm Bev, Ward 3.
Hi.
2 questions. First question is, what happens when, do you have any recommendations on what to do if I had an instance where I was walking and there was a group of people feeding a coyote in the ravine? So what do you recommend that somebody like me would do in that situation?
Call us, please call us, tell us where and when you saw that, and we will set up an investigation and a patrol.
Yeah. And you don't need to engage. It's your
No.
safety. We don't know how those people respond. So definitely always contact Animal Services so we can go investigate further.
So don't try to tell them diplomatically the way I tried. That didn't work very well?
Yeah, just call us and we'll respond for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I think we're...
Sorry, you had a second question?
Yeah, real quick. For those of us who walk dogs and see coyotes all the time in the naturalized areas, you don't want us to report every single sighting, do you?
Yeah.
I encourage...
We'll take all the information we can get.
Exactly.
All the data we can get. We're very data driven, as we've kind of touched on, and please, obviously, if you don't have time to, we're not, you know, don't let it take away from your well-being or life in general, but like, if you do have the time to report it, please do. Yeah, that's, yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Hi.
Tonight I've brought 2 personal alarms. I'm not going to set them off.
Sure.
But what do you think of this type of thing? They really pack a punch. If I was to, you know, it's really...
Is it high pitched or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if the coyote isn't habituated to that type of a noise, but as Para was saying, something like a car horn or even a whistle, right? You can imagine that many coyotes have probably heard soccer matches and whistles being used and stuff, so I don't know how closely those would
Well,
be.
I
But
don't think you want me...
you know, okay, they're that loud? If they're that loud, then they're probably pretty effective, if they're that loud. Yeah, great.
You know, they're really good. And,
Yeah.
And this one, you can order on Amazon, and
Okay.
you can also hang it on your doorknob in your house, and
All right.
if you put the prongs between the door and the frame, if somebody tries to open your door and it falls out, it's really, really
Okay,
loud.
great.
So
If it's that loud, I imagine it would be pretty effective, yeah.
Thank you.
Georgios. Okay. So we have one coming from online.
We actually have a few online, Jay.
good.
So Kara's asking, will coyotes prey on a fox?
Yes, they are competing for food, and so if yeah, they will certainly more of a territorial than for a food source. A coyote mated pair would not be uncommon for them to take out a mated pair of foxes in their territory because they don't want them eating the same food sources.
Great, thanks, Ayla. Janice is asking, is it okay to have a bird feeder on our property?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's permitted under our bylaw as long as you're picking up any spillage as soon as possible, because if you're not picking it up, you're attracting the coyotes, the rodents, the other wildlife that will also eat the bird feed.
Yeah. We encourage you to clean up the seed every day, and we also encourage you to wash the bird feeder often due to the avian flu concerns.
All right, Adriana would like to know, would a blowhorn be an effective way to deter a coyote?
Yep. Yes.
All right, Kirsten, how many of the annual 16 to 25 coyotes that died, how did they die? Were they hit by cars? Were they poisoned?
Most of them are road fatalities, yeah. Yeah.
All right, and what is the coyote's natural predator? Asked by Anne.
Cars and just general, yeah. Yeah, we don't, as we know, we don't have a larger predator here. If you are in bear country, then okay, bears would, but generally these guys are succumbing to road fatalities and disease, right? Like you saw the mange. Mange can really affect the population. If it takes hold, it can take out a whole family.
Great, thank you. And just some kudos online. Lori notes, very clear, helpful presentation, especially the 2023 data with the dog versus wildlife incidents and wildlife animal deaths, and the city system for prevention and sighting, encounter, and incident response. So they thank you for your hard work. We also have another resident that notes this was a very super helpful presentation, very informative. They appreciate all the city is doing, and they are happy to see that we're encouraging residents to coexist with coyotes. So great job, Animal Services team.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Can we get off stage?
Do we have any further questions in the room? Or online?
We do have one question online. Carrie, go ahead and we'll unmute you and go ahead and ask your question.
You about coyotes, seeing them more throughout the day. Coyotes are naturally diurnal, correct? And the only reason why within city limits they are seen mostly throughout the evening is because they have adapted to us. Is this not correct?
That they're diurnal? No, they're nocturnal.
Well, what do you mean by they've adapted to us?
Like that they've started, they've been active at night to avoid humans? Is that the question?
Coyotes are not nocturnal animals, correct?
Correct. They are active. They can be active during the day as well, not just at night.
All right, we have two more questions. Just to reconfirm, 311 is the correct number for Animal Services?
Yes.
Yep. We also have a more direct phone number, 905-896-5858, if you want to call that number instead. But 311 is just kind of the easiest thing to memorize.
Yep.
All right, we also have a question from Dawn. What do you do if a coyote is within 15 feet of you and your pet on a leash? The coyote is baring its teeth with a second coyote nearby. What do you recommend you do in that instance?
Go ahead.
So this is a hypothetical. So I'm not too sure if that's actually happened, but if you're in a situation where a coyote is approaching you and your dog, everything that we've said so far is what you want to do. You don't want to turn around. You don't want to run away from the coyote. You're gonna focus on the coyote. You're gonna look big. You're gonna make a lot of noise to try to encourage it to move along. And you're gonna be loud. You're not gonna just be like whisper to get away. You're gonna say, get back, coyote. You're gonna be super loud, so you're gonna show that you mean business. So yeah.
At the same time, creating more space, right?
Exactly. You want to look behind you, slowly walk backwards, continue making your big sudden movements, you keep being loud, don't turn your back to the coyote, and then slowly get yourself and your dog out of that situation as soon as possible, and then contact Animal Services so we can investigate, because that is a very strange situation.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Cheryl, we'll go ahead and unmute you if you have your question. All right, while we're waiting for Cheryl to contact us online, we do have 2 other questions here. Wondering about relocation as the city builds out massive housing areas along the lake.
Sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
So I think the question is, as the city expands and grows,
Yeah.
are these animals going to be displaced? And what's
That's
the impact
happening
of that?
for sure with development and taking over naturalized spaces. Yep, they're being pushed out of certain areas and displaced and having to kind of reestablish a territory or branch out and go to other places. As we said, you know, wild animals don't know what a city border would be. So if they're displaced, they move on until they find an appropriate location that they can live.
Okay, thanks, Ayla. Stephanie's asking, how do you report animal feeding?
On the interactive.
So there's several different mechanisms. They can call 311, or they can even report it on the map. So the public-facing map does not show feeding points of interest because oftentimes there is private information associated to that. So it is available for us for our tracking purposes and our outreach and our enforcement purposes.
Done?
Yeah,
Good? Okay, we think we got one more in the crowd and then we'll...
I just want to know if this presentation will be available.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was filmed tonight, and so you can...
Video just
Just the
The PowerPoint?
slideshow? That's more of a communications question. I know that this whole presentation is going to certainly be available.
Confirming the presentation will be available on the city's newsroom, so the website, and on social media.
Okay, yes, yes. I don't have that number directly. It is, we have a lot of people that evade us. I don't know how many there were last year.
We can get that information.
Yeah, we can.
We just don't have it right at this
Yeah,
point
we
in
just
time.
don't have the number. But there's a lot, it's a very difficult thing to enforce, as you can imagine, because feeding takes mere seconds. And also, there are many circumstances where our officers go to enforce and people just run away.
I have a question for all of you. We're always trying to do better to get, I know with our outreach, we don't reach everybody in the community. So if you guys have any sort of input or any sort of feedback on how we can better reach members of our community, we are always open to it. So you can always give us a call or even let us know right now what's the best way to reach members of our community. I know not everyone has access to the internet or social media. Learning about this type of event is all word of mouth. So if there's any better way for us to reach everyone, we have our ears open for that.
Okay. Another one online?
We have another question online. Cheryl was able to type in her question. Cheryl's asking, in different municipalities, they post signs telling residents that there have been coyote sightings in the area. Do you have signs to tell people about this in the city?
Well, we have our interactive map, and then we have started a QR code system. So we actually have developed QR codes that are being put on permanent park signage, and so it's just an extra blade on the sign. And when you scan the QR code, it will immediately connect you with either coyote information, because we have a coyote QR code, or there will be feeding information, because we have a separate QR code for feeding education. So I think that's what they're asking.
And the program's been successful, so we are looking to expand that program to other parks in the city.
All right, and that's it for our questions tonight. Turning it back to Jay.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So on behalf of the City of Mississauga Animal Services, I'd like to thank you for your participation in tonight's coyote session. We sincerely appreciate you taking the time out, especially on a snowy night. And if you have any further questions, as we've already mentioned, we have the contact information up here. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We really do count on the cooperation. As you can see, our program is really built on the cooperation and the communication we have with our residents. So we encourage that you reach out to us for any questions, any coyote sightings, and we'll be more than happy to assist you. Likewise, after the session, if you wish to stick around, we're going to stick around for a little while. So if you have any further questions you want to approach us one-on-one, we're more than happy to answer those questions. Optionally, as I said, if you have any follow-up questions, you can call Mississauga Animal Services at the 905-896-5858 number or through 311, and we're more than happy to help you should more questions come to mind following this session. So thank you very much for your time, and please enjoy the rest of your evening. Oh, and be careful of the driving conditions out there in case it's slippery and people are still clearing the roads. So, all right, well done, guys. Well done. Well done. Nicely done.